It all started with a shortcut. You know, one of those decisions that feels smart at the time but turns into something you'll regret forever. I was driving to my parents' house for Thanksgiving dinner after finishing a long shift at the restaurant. I was tired, hungry, and just wanted to get there already. The main highway was packed, so I decided to take a back road I'd heard about. A quiet little shortcut through the woods. It looked empty, peaceful even. But that's where everything went wrong. At first, it was just me and the road. The trees on either side were tall and thick, their branches reaching out like they were trying to cover the sky. The air was cold, and the only sound was the hum of my car's engine. No streetlights, no other cars, just me. I should have known better. I should have turned back when the pavement started to crack and the road got darker, but I kept going. It was fine. It was just a shortcut. About 10 minutes in, I saw it. An old car pulled over on the side of the road. Its hazard lights were blinking, casting an orange glow into the darkness. Normally, I wouldn't stop, but something about the situation made me slow down. The car looked like it had been sitting there for a while. The windows were fogged up, and the driver's door was slightly open. I didn't see anyone inside. I pulled over ahead of it and hesitated. Should I help? Should I just drive off? It was Thanksgiving, after all, and if someone was stranded, I'd feel terrible if I didn't at least check. So, I got out of my car, leaving the engine running just in case. Hello? I called out, walking slowly toward the car. No answer. Hey, is anyone there? Do you need help? Still nothing. The silence felt heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on me. My breath puffed out in little clouds, and my shoes crunched on the gravel. That's when I saw the trunk. It was slightly open, just enough to notice. Something dark was smeared along the edge, something that looked like blood. My stomach dropped. My first thought was maybe it was an animal, a deer someone hit and tried to load into their car. But it didn't make sense. Who leaves their car like that? And where was the driver? I backed up, suddenly aware of how quiet it was. Too quiet. No wind, no rustling leaves. Just the faint sound of my car's engine running behind me. I turned around, ready to leave, when I heard it, a rustling sound coming from the woods. Who's there? I called out, my voice shaky. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. No answer. Just the rustling again, this time closer. I hurried back to my car, fumbling with the door handle, when I saw him. A man stepped out of the woods, stumbling toward the road. His clothes were torn, his face pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He was muttering something, but I couldn't hear it over the sound of my pulse in my ears. He got closer, waving his arms. Hey! Wait, he shouted. Please, help me. I didn't know what to do. He looked scared, but something about him felt off. I cracked my window just a little. What happened? I asked, keeping my hand on the gear shift. They're coming, he said, his eyes darting back toward the woods. You have to let me in. Please, they're coming. Who's coming? I asked, but he didn't answer. He just kept looking over his shoulder like he was expecting something, or someone, to appear any second. That's when I saw movement in the trees. Another figure, stepping out from the shadows. This one was different. He was calm, deliberate, holding something in his hand, a tire iron. My blood ran cold. I rolled up my window and locked the doors. I'm sorry, I said, shaking my head. I can't. The man outside my car started pounding on the window. Don't leave me. Please, he screamed. The other figure was getting closer now, his steps slow but steady, like he wasn't in a rush because he knew there was no escape. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I threw the car into drive and hit the gas. My tires kicked up gravel as I sped down the road, my heart racing faster than my engine. In my rearview mirror, I saw the man with the tire iron throw it. It hit the back of my car with a loud thunk, shattering the rear window. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I kept driving, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror over and over again, but all I saw was darkness. They were gone. Or maybe they just weren't following me anymore. By the time I reached the main road, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely steer. I pulled into the nearest gas station and sat there for a while, trying to calm down. The clerk gave me a strange look when I walked in, probably because I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I told him what happened, and his face went pale. "That road," he said, shaking his head. "You're lucky you got out. People go missing out there." I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't want to know. I just got back in my car and drove to my parents' house, checking the mirrors the whole way. But when I got there and opened my door, I froze. There was a bloody handprint on the inside of my back window. When I left my apartment that Thanksgiving evening, I thought the only thing I had to worry about was forgetting the pumpkin pie. I didn't expect to end up running for my life. It started as soon as I grabbed my keys and jacket. I noticed something strange. The peephole on my door was fogged up. Not like condensation, but as if someone had been standing too close, breathing on it. My heart did a little jump, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was from earlier in the day, and I hadn't noticed. I brushed it off, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the hallway. The building was quiet, too quiet. Usually, you'd hear someone's TV or muffled voices from an apartment. But tonight, it was dead silent. The flickering hallway light didn't help. As I locked my door, I heard a faint scuffling sound, like shoes dragging against the floor. I froze, looking down the long hallway. Nothing. It was empty. I shook my head, laughing at myself. "It's just the old building," I muttered. But that didn't stop the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. I made my way to the elevator. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I pressed the button and waited. The hallway stretched out behind me, dim and still, but I kept glancing back, my nerves on edge. When the elevator doors finally slid open, I stepped in quickly, relieved to be leaving. Just as the doors started to close, I saw a hand shoot through the gap, forcing them back open. A man stepped inside. He looked off. His clothes were rumpled, like he hadn't changed in days, and his eyes seemed hollow, staring past me. He was holding a folded piece of paper in one hand, gripping it tightly. He didn't press a floor button, and the doors closed in uncomfortable silence. I tried to act normal, staring at the numbers above the door as the elevator descended. But I could feel his eyes on me, watching me. "Is this yours?" he asked suddenly, holding out the folded paper. His voice was flat, emotionless. I glanced at the paper and shook my head. "No, sorry," I said, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. He didn't move, just kept holding the paper. His knuckles were scraped, and there was a dark stain on his shirt near the collar, something that looked suspiciously like blood. My stomach tightened. I glanced at the floor numbers. We were only on the 5th floor. It felt like the slowest elevator ride of my life. When the elevator finally dinged and the doors slid open to the lobby, I stepped out quickly. "Have a good night," I said, forcing a polite nod. He didn't respond, but I could feel him following me. His footsteps echoed behind mine as I crossed the lobby. I headed for the front doors, but something stopped me. A gut instinct, maybe. Instead of walking out, I veered to the right, pretending to check the mailboxes. I wanted to see if he would leave. But he didn't. He stopped a few feet away and just stood there, watching me. My heart was pounding now. I fumbled with the mailbox key, pretending to look for something, but my mind was racing. What was this guy's deal? Was he just weird, or was something seriously wrong? When I turned around, he had moved closer, too close. "You sure this isn't yours?" he asked again, holding up the paper. This time, his tone had an edge to it, like he wasn't really asking. I shook my head, trying to stay calm. "No, man, it's not. Sorry." I decided then and there to go back upstairs. Something about the way he was standing, the way he looked at me, screamed danger. I walked briskly past him, heading for the stairwell instead of the elevator. I didn't want to be trapped in a box with him again. As soon as I stepped into the stairwell, I heard the heavy door creak open behind me. He was following me. My heart was racing now, adrenaline kicking in. I took the stairs two at a time, trying to stay ahead. His footsteps echoed, uneven and faster than before. He wasn't walking, he was running. I reached the third floor and darted into a maintenance corridor I knew well. It was dark and cramped, but it had a corner where I could hide. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing, listening as his footsteps slowed. He was close. Too close. I could hear him breathing now, shallow and quick. He muttered something under his breath, but I couldn't make out the words. My phone was in my pocket, and I carefully slid it out, texting my friend to call the police. I kept the screen dim and the sound off, praying he wouldn't hear. Minutes felt like hours. He lingered, pacing the hallway outside the maintenance door. At one point, the doorknob rattled, and I thought for sure he'd found me. But then, I heard footsteps retreating, growing fainter. I stayed frozen, waiting, until I finally heard the distant sound of sirens. When I emerged, the lobby was buzzing with blue and red lights. The police asked questions, but the man was gone. Disappeared, like he was never there. As I finally left for dinner, shaken but relieved, I reached into my jacket pocket for my car keys. My fingers brushed against something, a folded piece of paper. I pulled it out, my blood running cold. Written in shaky handwriting were 3 words, "See you soon." I've never been so scared in my life. It started as just another Thanksgiving delivery shift, easy money before heading to my family dinner. But what happened that night still makes my hands shake when I think about it. It was already dark, and my GPS sent me out to this rural address way out in the middle of nowhere. I should have known something was off when the paved road turned into dirt, but I thought, just one more delivery, then I'm done. The fog was so thick I could barely see a few feet in front of my car. Every tree I passed seemed like it was leaning in closer, and the only sound was the crunch of my tires on the gravel road. That's when I saw them, just sitting there on the side of the road. A pair of shoes. They weren't tossed or abandoned like someone dropped them, they were neatly placed, side by side, like someone had left them there on purpose. My stomach dropped, but I told myself it was nothing. People do weird things. Maybe they fell out of someone's car. I shook it off and kept driving. After what felt like forever, the GPS told me to take a sharp left down an even narrower road. This one barely looked like a road at all, more like a path that hadn't been used in years. I slowed down, squinting through the fog, when my headlights caught something up ahead. A person. They were just standing there in the middle of the road. I hit the brakes hard, my car coming to a stop just a few feet away. My heart was pounding. It was a man, wearing dark clothes, with his back to me. I rolled down my window just a little and called out, "Hey, are you okay?" He didn't move. Didn't say a word. He just stood there for a few seconds, then slowly turned and walked into the woods. No hurry, no hesitation. Just walked away. Every instinct I had told me to turn around and get out of there. But the address I needed to deliver to was only half a mile ahead, and I didn't want to lose the delivery. So I kept going. When I finally pulled up to the house, it looked abandoned. The windows were dark, and the place was falling apart, paint peeling, roof sagging, weeds everywhere. There was an old truck in the driveway, but it looked like it hadn't moved in years. I didn't even turn off my car. I grabbed the package, walked up to the door, and knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. "Delivery." I called out. Still nothing. Then I noticed the door wasn't shut all the way. It was slightly open, just enough to see a crack of darkness inside. My gut told me to leave the package on the porch and go, but something made me curious. Maybe it was the thought of someone waiting for this delivery. Maybe I just wanted to be sure everything was okay. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air smelled damp and metallic, like wet rust. The place was a mess, furniture overturned, deep scratches along the walls. I could feel my pulse in my ears as I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" That's when I heard it, a thump from upstairs. My breath caught in my throat. I stood there frozen, waiting to hear it again. Another thump, followed by what sounded like slow, dragging footsteps. My body screamed at me to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. Then, out of nowhere, there was a loud bang, like a door slamming shut. That snapped me out of it. I turned and bolted back outside, my heart racing. I ran to my car, threw the package in the passenger seat, and tried to start the engine. It wouldn't turn over. The car sputtered once, then went silent. I looked up at the rearview mirror and nearly jumped out of my skin. Standing at the edge of the woods, just barely visible through the fog, was the same man I'd seen earlier. He wasn't moving, just watching me. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Typical. I didn't have time to think. I shoved my phone in my pocket, got out of the car, and ran. The only thing on my mind was finding someone, anyone, who could help. The road was pitch black, and the fog swallowed up everything around me. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, but I kept moving, my ears straining to hear if anyone, or anything, was following me. Then I heard it, footsteps. Heavy and uneven, like someone dragging a leg. They were getting closer. I ran faster, lungs burning, legs screaming. My flashlight flickered, threatening to go out, but I didn't stop. Up ahead, I saw a light, a pair of headlights coming down the road. Relief washed over me as I waved my arms, shouting for help. The car slowed, and a man stepped out. "You okay?" he asked, his voice calm. Before I could answer, my flashlight beam caught his face. My stomach twisted. It was him, the same man from the road, the same one who'd been watching me. He smiled, a slow, cold smile, and said, "Long way from home, aren't you?" I didn't stick around to find out what he meant. I ran.